Thank you so much, Amir. It's really a great pleasure to introduce Chip to our audience. I have known Chip for more than 20 years, and he still looks great. He looks as great as 20 years ago when we met at YPO. And, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced visiting Joie de Vivre hotels. I think what Chip does incredibly well is the experience you have and the culture of anybody who I have met in his team. Quite frankly, his leadership, and I love to learn more about wisdom that he passes through to his teammates at Joie de Vivre, at Airbnb. And now, Chip, I'm a little bit hurt because you didn't invite me to Baja, Mexico. I would love the first chance we get to meet each other face to face. But to pass it on to you, Chip, you have been inspiring leader for me, for all our colleagues. And I love to hear more about your new book, Wisdom, and how you see the light after this challenging times.
Thank you.
Please, audience, here is Chip, and here is very good friend of mine, and I'd be very excited to hear what you have to say, Chip. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. It's great to see you. And I feel honored to be in the plug and play community again. I've had the good honor of speaking down in Sunnyvale on a couple of occasions before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my frame for leadership in difficult times, and then move into the conversation about, what do I see recovering more quickly, and what changes do I see in the industry, maybe long term. So I'll do my best. My crystal ball can sometimes be very cloudy. I have been lucky enough to be one of the first boutique hoteliers in the U.S. Alongside of Ian Schrager and Bill Kimpton, and Joie de Vivre grew into the second largest boutique hotelier in the U.S. and is now part of the Hyatt chain. And then I jumped on the Airbnb bandwagon over 7 years ago when the founders of Airbnb approached me when they had a tiny little tech startup and wanted me to help them disrupt the industry that I had been a part of. So I became the Darth Vader of the hotel business because I still owned hotels, but I was also helping to steer the rocket ship with the founders. And then more recently, the Modern Elder Academy, which I think it's the world's first midlife wisdom school. I'll talk about that too. Key lessons for leadership in a difficult time. Number one, and I've learned this, and actually Brian Chesky's learning this right now, having laid off 25% of the staff at Airbnb yesterday and all consultants. So I would say number one is leaders are the emotional thermostats of those they lead. You're not the thermometer, you're the thermostat. What's the difference? So thermostat basically means that you set the climate control. And one of the things that a lot of leaders don't recognize is that the more senior you are in leadership, the more your actions, inactions, grimaces on your face show up. People notice things, and your team is noticing your emotions. So one of the things I want people to recognize is that if you are anxious as a leader, your anxiety will be a contagion for everyone else. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be transparent. It just means that if you're going to be transparent and vulnerable about what you're going through, including if you need to shed some tears, which is perfectly fine. There's a great New York Times article about that in the last couple of days, about leaders shedding tears. Fine to shed tears. But the thing to know is that you better match that vulnerability with some vision. Because what people are looking for is for you to actually be transparent and authentic. And that may mean that you are struggling with certain things, but they're also looking for you to actually remind them of the North Star of the company, where you're going, why you all joined this company in the first place. So one of the key things to know is just you are the emotional thermostat. Just remember that anxiety equals uncertainty times powerlessness. Those two ingredients, because there's a lot of anxiety, it's probably the predominant emotion right now in most companies, and especially in travel or hospitality companies. If anxiety equals uncertainty times powerlessness, how do you create a little more certainty for your team? Usually that has a lot to do with transparency. And how do you create the sense that people have some powerfulness in what they do? How do you help? One of the things we did during my joie de vivre era, we went through two once-in-a-lifetime downturns, what were supposed to be two once-in-a-lifetime downturns in the same decade. This one's worse, but that was the dotcom and 9/11 period, and then and SARS, and then the Great Recession. And one of the things I learned that was a really interesting and cheap way of helping your employees understand that they have an impact is we had 52 boutique hotels over the course of 24 years that I ran the company. What we do is each of the individual hotels had a staff meeting once a month with all of their team. And what we started to do is bring in customers to tell their stories. So, you know, in one of the hotels, there might be a customer who's staying there who comes every week, and they're sort of a road warrior who stays in the hotel. And there's a reason they're staying in that hotel. What we asked the customer to do is come into the staff meeting, give a 5-minute pitch for why you love that hotel, and mention at least 2 or 3 of the employees by name and explain why it is that they have been very valuable to you. What is it that they do that actually makes your experience better? Because one of the things a lot of employees need to hear is that the work that they're doing is important. Otherwise, if you don't think the work's important, you'll have a tendency to not give much attention to the work you're doing. Okay, so another learning under the category of learning to lead in a downturn is make sure everybody's clear about the metric that defines success. There was a metric that defined success before COVID. That metric no longer exists. If you're still focused on the pre-COVID goals you had, you are going to have a very depressed team. So for us in the downturns, what I really liked using as our primary metric was market share, because market share allowed us to see how we're doing relative to our competitors. So in the hotel world, that meant we had Smith Travel research reports that would give us the opportunity to see how's our market share versus the competitive set for each one of our hotels. And the reason that this is important is, number one, you got to get people aligned around what defines success. And then once you've done that, you need to help people to create what I call the momentum of victory. Nobody wants to be on a losing team. And if you're in an industry, everybody feels like they're on a losing team. But the truth is that pain is relative. And some companies are more in pain and suffering than others. You want your company in a difficult industry to feel like it is a company that is going to survive. The momentum of victory means the following. You identify on a regular basis, preferably weekly, what progress is happening in the company. Some of it may be procedural, it's things you've got accomplished, but often it is the data that you're getting around this new most important metric. In our case, it was market share. And in our downturns, we showed that 80% of our hotels were gaining market share. Very unusual for boutique hotels to be gaining market share in a downturn versus chain hotels. The chains have a much bigger, network. But the fact that 80% of our hotels were getting market share was something we just kept coming back to over and over again. And then we'd also talk about other things too. So if you create the momentum of victory, what you end up doing is creating an environment where people feel like we're making progress. There's a great book that comes out of the Harvard Business School called The Progress Principle. Highly recommend you buy it. It just basically talks about the fact that most companies are really focused on the idea that, I'm sorry, most people are focused on, are they making progress? When you're making progress, you feel both happiness and success. And then the last thing around just what to learn from a downturn is we did an exercise at both Joie de Vivre and at Airbnb, the following exercise. And I think it's actually not a bad one for you to do for your company right now. It's called the "What Business Are You In" exercise. We learned this from Peter Drucker, the management theorist. He said that the most important question any organizational leader can ever ask is, what business are we in? And so I learned this at Joie de Vivre. We started it there. So we did this in the bottom of a downturn. We had our top 12 executives, our leadership team, in a room. We split up into 6 dyads, 2 people each, and one person and 2 people would face each other. The first person, the questioner, would ask the question to the other person, what business are we in? And the second person, the person who's getting the question asked to them, would then have to answer that question. What business are we in? Well, for Joie de Vivre, we were in the boutique hotel business. Then the first person who asked the question would say, thank you. And it would ask the question again, what business are we in? And the second person would have to answer, but they can't answer the same way twice. So that process, and you do it 5 times. So by the 5th question, you've done an archaeological dig to really get clear on what's your differentiator. What's the thing that's the essence of your organization? And this was what got us to, at Joie de Vivre, knowing we were in the identity refreshment business. Each of our boutique hotels was different. And what we felt was that the guests who came and stayed at our hotel would have their identity refreshed based upon the personality of the hotel. So if you liked the Hotel Vitale, which had 5 adjectives that defined it: modern, urbane, fresh, natural, and nurturing, you felt a little bit more modern, urbane, fresh, natural, and nurturing when you left. And if those adjectives meant something to you, we'd created a differentiator beyond what a normal boutique hotel would create. Similarly, at Airbnb, when I joined, the month after I joined, I helped lead an offsite retreat with our leadership team. And we came to the conclusion, using the same exercise, that we were in the business of helping people belong anywhere. Belong anywhere ultimately became the marketing phrase that defined Airbnb, and had a lot to do with what the company's organizing principle was, because I was the head of global hospitality and strategy for the company. Okay, now let me move to the next subject, which is startup advice. What startup advice would I give you as young startup folks? Well, number 1 is stay liquid, and I don't mean drink yourself to death. Staying liquid is so important. Yes, you could drink if you want, drink alcohol, but the staying liquid is all about just your cash flow, your burn rate, and just knowing that, as Brian Chesky just showed yesterday, and I've spent the last 7 years being Brian's mentor in-house for 4 years and 3 years now as a strategic advisor. Brian had to get to the place, and it was really painful for him to say some of his pet projects, some of the things that he felt really defined the company's long-term strategy and goals. He had to make some tough decisions and get back to the clarity of what is the core business of Airbnb. So there's a lot of projects, like, for example, transportation. Brian hired Fred Reed, a friend of mine, who is the founding CEO of Virgin America. He was president of Delta and Lufthansa. He was going to come in and help create a whole transportation component, mostly air transportation component to Airbnb. But that, in this shrinking of this staff by 25%, that's an initiative that had to go away, at least for now. So being really thoughtful about your cash flow, essential. I'm saying something pretty obvious there. Number 2 is focus on solving your customers' problems. It's really easy in a downturn like this to get incredibly focused on your own problems, like cash flow, and actually move away from the bigger question, which is, what is the customer problem I'm trying to solve here? So for me, one of the things that I loved doing there was, we were in the process, my first hotel was a place called the Phoenix. And the Phoenix is I still own it 34 years later. It's a broken down motel in the Tenderloin of San Francisco. I bought it when I was 26. The market we were going after was musicians and artists and entertainers who were traveling. Well, in launching that hotel in early 1987, I didn't know a damn thing about the hotel business. But I did know about marketing. And I said, okay, who is it that makes the decision of where a band stays if they're on the road with their tour bus and all? And we went to 3 different groups of people thinking, okay, entertainment travel agents, they book them. Well, they do, but actually they weren't the primary decision maker about where the band was going to stay. Okay, secondly, the venue. In San Francisco, that would have meant, Slim's or the Great American Music Hall or the Fillmore or the Warfield, a bunch of musical venues. And maybe they book where the band's going to stay. Nope, not really. Thirdly, it was like, maybe it's the management company that, usually based in Nashville or New York or LA. Nope, they didn't do it. What I found was the decision maker for where a band was going to stay was the tour manager. The tour manager usually was 5 years older than the rest of the band. It was almost always a guy. His job was to make sure that nobody had a drug overdose or got hijacked by a groupie and that you couldn't find your band member. And so the customer problem we were trying to solve with him was there were 2 key things that were really on the mind of tour managers. Number one is, where will we park our bus? And generally speaking, that was a really hard problem for a lot of hotels, because there wasn't really a great place for bus parking. If there was a parking garage, you couldn't fit a bus. The bus was way too tall. Well, we were a motel. We were a motor lodge that had a big open parking lot. So we got that right, and we didn't even charge for the bus parking. So that was number one. Number two, and this came with time, I figured it out. These tour managers were so stressed out. The unrecognized need, I wrote a book called Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow. And the key for customers, the transformational need for a customer, is to figure out their unrecognized need that they didn't even tell you. The unrecognized need for a tour manager was they were stressed out. So what we did is we had a massage studio in this motor lodge, and we offered for the tour managers, if they brought us 10 room nights, a free massage. And so we started getting the tour managers calling us from Denver or Dallas on their way to San Francisco saying, I can't wait to get there. I'm so stressed out. So the thing you may solve for a decision maker may not be obvious based upon the product you have, but there may be something specific that actually is quite popular across those kinds of decision makers, because once the first tour managers figured this out, they told all the other tour managers, and it's part of the reason why this funky motel in the Tenderloin started having Linda Ronstadt and David Bowie and all kinds of other famous people staying there. Number two is, in terms of startup advice, focus on your evangelist. The Airbnb founders in their early days, 2009, when they were accepted into Y Combinator, they basically spent all their time, they were a San Francisco company, but they spent all their time in New York, because their evangelists were in New York. New York was the place that they knew they needed to learn from. And so they literally went door to door, learning from the hosts in New York, and then also spending time with the guests, and actually going and being a guest with the hosts in New York and giving feedback to them. All right, so let me move on to the next subject, because I only have about 10 more minutes. So what's going to happen in terms of coming back, the travel comeback? Which parts of travel are going to come back? Anything that has a really savvy digital component to it, I'm a big believer in it, and I know a lot of people in the plug and play world are in the digital space. But just recognize that your digital product better be solving a customer problem, not something that feels like it's frosting on the cake. Because quite frankly, right now, most of the hotel industry and the travel industry is going to get back down to basics. So if you can actually solve something that's a basic problem that actually saves money, that'll be really high priority, or creates a better relationship with the customers or employees, you're probably in a good place. If you're actually providing something that was more appropriate for a different time, when people had bigger budgets to work with, I would say it's time for a pivot. So which parts of the industry, here's my priority of where I think, travel is going to make the comeback. I appreciated what Saeed showed earlier in terms of the timeline. You're going to see really quick comeback in certain parts of travel. Anything related to family travel or special occasion travel, anything related to family reunions, important birthdays, because someone only has a 75th birthday once, weddings, Zoom or virtual reality weddings just don't cut it. In fact, with the wedding business, because so many weddings got either canceled or postponed this spring, there's going to be an overflow of people trying to actually have fall weddings. So there's some real opportunity there. Another opportunity is transformational travel. It's actually, some people call it the fastest growing segment of travel. What the heck is transformational travel? Is it going to Peru and doing ayahuasca? Well, yeah, it could be that, but that's not the primary part of transformational travel. Transformational travel is when you go on an experience, not to sit in a lounge chair and drinking a colorful, cocktail with an umbrella on it. It's actually to go to learn, or go to make a difference, or go to experience a deeper connection with others. So that could be going to Canyon Ranch and actually, going to some kind of personal retreat there, going to Bhutan and studying with the monks up in the Himalayas. Our Modern Elder Academy is an example of transformational travel, and we're just getting the phones ringing off the hook right now. We're actually closed till October because of the pandemic, but because our whole business model is premised on the idea of helping people navigate midlife transitions so that they can repurpose themselves in new ways and to reimagine their mindset around aging. This is a pretty big business right now because there's a lot of people losing their jobs, a lot of people trying to figure out at age 45 or 55 or 65 what they're going to do with themselves. So I'd say that's another segment that's going to come back. Staycations will come back quickly, so that people drive destinations will come back. I think leisure will come back faster than corporate, and that's partly because corporate is getting very used to Zoom calls now. I do think in the fall there'll be a lot of corporate retreats, offsites, small offsites, to talk about 2021. I think that the business planning for 2021 is going to be more in depth than it's probably ever been in terms of an annual cycle of looking at where things are going. I think that overall corporate travel probably will make some comeback in the fall, as will international travel, depending upon public health and depending upon how much we've controlled this virus. I don't think people are going to exclusively wait. Some people will exclusively wait until there's a vaccine to travel. I think on a plane, I think that's a small percentage of the regular traveling public. Who's going to get hurt the worst? It's pretty obvious. I mean, the cruise industry is going to be in a rough place for a long time. And major conventions and meetings. I think major conventions and meetings are going to completely have to rethink themselves. If you can be in the business of really creating an experiential convention conference that has elements to it that feel built into like a unique experience, as opposed to just what's happening right now, which is me just talking at you. I think any kind of technology there is has a great opportunity. Finally, as I wrap up with my last 3 or 4 minutes here, in terms of major changes, what are we going to see? Well, yes, we'll see lots and lots of technical things that allow people to avert the front desk, allow people to actually have some kind of health maintenance system that allows them to sort of get a sense of what's the health, the wellness of a room. I mean, I think companies like Delos are going to get very popular because, frankly, they have a lot of money and they're all about wellness and all about cleanliness, and applied to originally to office buildings, but now to hotels as well. But here's actually, I think, a really interesting premise. There's a company in London called The Collective. I've been the mentor to the founder. In fact, just before this call, I was on the phone with him with our weekly call. So there's 5 different founders that I am a mentor for right now. They're poised to become the largest and maybe the most respected co-living company in the world. And what's been interesting to see in their business in the year and a half that I've been involved is a real shift. So what we know is there are hotels and there are homes, and hotels are about Marriott and Hilton, and homes are about Airbnb or VRBO in second homes, vacation homes. What I'm starting to see is there's this hybridization. And the Collective is a co-living company. For those who don't know, I think you mostly know co-living, I'm sure, but just quickly, co-living is about small residential units, bigger social spaces. So there's some risks in a pandemic about that. But what it is it's creating a package price so it makes affordable living work. And sometimes in certain places, intergenerational living work. The average size collective building is about 500 units. So it's a pretty big building. What's been fascinating is their business, their strongest business before the pandemic is the people staying a week to 3 months. So they're based in London. Some of their initial projects are there. They have 3 kinds of customers: people staying a week or less, people staying 3 months or more, and then people staying a week to 3 months. So the extended stay travel business, we know, has had real opportunity for a while. It's been growing much faster than the overall hotel industry. But here's the part where COVID makes it interesting. Digital nomads have gone mainstream. What do I mean by that? I mean, I think one of the more interesting trends will be the need for service departments, which is something we don't see in the United States much. In fact, the hotel industry, the global hotel industry, has done a really poor job of creating an extended stay product. Extended stay America, residents in embassy suites, nobody wants to stay in one of those buildings, one of those units for more, it's just like one boring room with a second boring room. Very predictable, not particularly interesting. What I think we're going to see is a growing number of people who are going to say, I don't have to live in the place that I've always lived, because I can work remotely. I can travel to the office from some other place. And therefore I can actually be a little bit more footloose and untethered in terms of where I want to live. So what you're going to see is, and I've seen it already through Airbnb and then now at the Collective, but what I'm seeing absolutely right now is the number of people who have chosen to move beyond their traditional home and maybe even give up their home. So they're looking for not a home away from home, but a home instead of home. And so I think the trend of people being more mobile, Wi-Fi being better all over the planet, people wanting to travel and not just travel and visit a place, but travel and live in a place for an extended period of time, 2 months, 3 months at a time, and then move on to another place is going to be a big trend. And there's a lot of opportunities with that. So with that, it is now time for me to wrap up and just say, I know there's lots of chats, lots of Q&As here, but I was told that, I'm here to talk to you for about 25 minutes and then that's all I can do. But unless Saeed has something else in mind or Amir has something else in mind, I'm open to however you want to take it.
Thank you, Chip. First of all, really, really good insights. I follow you on LinkedIn and I love your posts. I wish you would have more of them on a regular basis. It always puts a smile on my face. There are great questions here. If you could spare 5 more minutes with us,
yes,
that would be much, much appreciated.
Yes, let's do that.
On one of your LinkedIn posts, Chip, not too long ago, and you touched upon this earlier, you mentioned that progress is essential for all human beings. Mm-hmm. And that could be progress in your personal life, or it could be progress in your professional life. I want to focus a little bit on the professional life as it relates to young entrepreneurs in the travel industry. Mm-hmm. Obviously, making progress these days, be it with fundraising, be it with your clients who were paying clients and now they're looking to get out of those contracts, has become very, very difficult.
Yes.
So my question to you is, in the context of your professional life, if you were a young entrepreneur again at the ripe age of 26 when you started Joie de Vie, what does progress look like in an environment where, you know, everybody's telling you no, and it's very hard to move the needle in your professional life? And then I would love for you to give us some insight. Does that mean that young entrepreneurs need to focus more on personal progress in the meantime until the environment improves? And how do you balance the two?
So a few thoughts on that. Number one, I have a daily blog called Wisdom Well, and it's on the Modern Elder Academy website. But if you just look at Wisdom Well, Chip Conley, and Google, and you'll find it. And we tend to post those on LinkedIn. So that's what Amir's referring to. So there's typically a daily blog. Here's my recommendation. The thing I did at age 26, well, especially during difficult times, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I started something called the Wisdom Book. And it was just a little notebook like this. And it was like a journal. And every weekend, I would make a list of what I learned that week. So the lesson, and often the learning, the things I was putting in there were my painful lessons. And so for 34 years now, 34 years now, I have kept a wisdom book. So I have about 8 of them now. And every weekend I will go to it and I will actually make a list of the things that I learned that week. Because making a list of the things you've learned is a way to metabolize some meaning and some learning and feeling a sense of progress. And I got to tell you, when I went through the Great Recession, I went back to my wisdom book from the dotcom bust, 9/11, to look at some of my lessons there to say, can some of those lessons be applicable today? And it was true that they could. But very few of us actually cultivate and harvest our wisdom along the way. So the progress principle on this would be, your progress is going to be your learning. It may not always be the effect of your business in the short term. In fact, you may have to close down your business. I mean, one of the other key lessons is like, there are certain times when you need to actually accept that failure is not the way to look at this. The noble experiment is the way to look at this. You tried a noble experiment and the headwinds were too strong, but you learned something from it. And if you can actually metabolize that learning in such a way that wherever you go from here forward, you have your wisdom books and they can actually be right there. I would go, if I were you and you shut this business down 6 months from now and you went out and raised money a year from now, I'd go into the venture capitalist, I'd go into the private equity, I'd go into the seed capital and say, here's my wisdom books. And I use my wisdom books as a way to metabolize what I've learned along the way. If I was an investor, and I am, I would be really impressed. Additionally, I would reach out to people older than you, not because they're smarter than you. When Brian and me, man, I was a mentor. I was as much an intern as I was a mentor to Brian because I was learning from him. But people who've been around a little bit longer have gone through some downturns. This one's the most severe. So let's just start by saying, either of the two I've mentioned before, the dot-com bust and the 9/11, as well as Great Recession, were nothing like this. But these people who've been through it before have pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is another form of wisdom, another way of defining wisdom. Pattern recognition means you can sort of see things early and then you know how to respond accordingly, whether it's business strategy or it's the emotional intelligence of the team and how they're working well together, etc. And that's been the number one thing I've been doing right now with my founders that I mentor, is helping them see, here's the pattern recognition, here's the priority. You have to focus your attention right this week on this, get that solved, and then we can focus on something else next week. But the natural thing for a lot of founders right now is to be scattered, to be going in 25 different directions at once, when in fact, it's really about prioritizing and focusing.
Thank you, Chip. And how lucky are we to have access to your wisdom books, that have been compiled over the past few decades. For those of you who don't know, Chip's latest book is Wisdom at Work. And as he mentioned, he does have a Wisdom Well blog. I highly recommend you check them out. I learn from them on a regular basis on the blog. Every time he posts, I learn something new. So thank you for providing that content to everybody, Chip.
Great.
Just one final question, if you can answer this in less than 60 seconds. I know we're
Yes.
taking more time than we should. A question on the Q&A that I think is on top of everybody's mind is digital immunity passports for people to be able to actually travel again with their friends, family, and rest assured that either they've had this virus and they don't have to worry about getting it again or transmitting it if there is don't show any symptoms, if you will, and don't know if they have it. What are your thoughts on that? Digital immunity passports to get travel going again for those folks who have not been impacted or have been impacted, who are not going to be transmitting this virus to others?
I think the hard, I mean, I like the idea of it. I think the hard part of it is it's going to have to be flexible enough because we're going to have more pandemics. So as long as it's got the flexibility to address the next set of viruses, maybe we won't have more pandemics, but we'll have epidemics. And an epidemic, of course, is more centralized to certain locations. So I like the idea of it. I do think it's a natural, and I think that frankly, biotech is going to be the key area of innovation, not just in the travel space, but just in all spaces in the next 20 years as a result of this. So I think companies that actually can mix biotech with travel, I think are on a very smart path. But it's in 60 seconds, it's hard for me to say much more than that.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Chip,
Right.
for your time. Always a pleasure. It
Great
only
to be
took
with you.
me 4 years to get you back as a keynote speaker. So I'll try again in 4 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Amir.
Thank you so
Saeed.
much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Great seeing both of you. All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.